Hello everyone, and welcome back to a new episode. I know many of you use these videos to help you sleep, so before we begin, I thought it would be fun for everyone to say hello and leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. Your engagement really makes this channel special. And hey, if you enjoy getting your nightly dose of thrills and chills with us, why not hit that subscribe button below? It's the best way to never miss out on the latest terrifying tales. So kick back, relax, and let's get started. The incessant rocking of the leviathan beneath me used to be a lullaby, a constant hum of gentle travel. Now, on this forsaken Arctic cruise, it was a maddening tremor, a constant reminder of my isolation. My dream job, a photographer for a luxury line, had morphed into a waking nightmare. It started subtly, eerie whispers in deserted hallways, shadows that seemed to linger just beyond the periphery of vision. Then came the photos, grainy, distorted images on my camera that weren't there when I took them. Eerie figures, elongated and spectral, leering from the decks above. I chalked it up to faulty equipment, the extreme cold messing with the digital sensors. But the cold couldn't explain the crew's hushed tones, the way they'd dart nervous glances at me whenever I mentioned the photos. The whispers became more pronounced, a language I didn't understand, yet felt inexplicably familiar. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, the silence broken by rhythmic tapping on my cabin wall, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. One night, curiosity overwhelmed my fear. I snuck out, camera clutched in sweaty hands, drawn by the source of the tapping. It led me to a lower deck, a labyrinthine maze of storage rooms and rusty pipes. The air here hung heavy, thick with the smell of brine and something metallic, a tang that made my stomach churn. As I rounded a corner, the tapping stopped. In the flickering fluorescent light, I saw it, a massive metal door, etched with arcane symbols that pulsed with an otherworldly luminescence. A primal dread welled up inside me, urging me to flee. But then, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence, raw and desperate. It came from inside the room. Without thinking, I slammed my shoulder against the door. It groaned open, revealing a scene ripped straight from my worst nightmares. The room was a charnel house, reeking of decay, illuminated by an unnatural green glow emanating from the center. Gnarled figures, impossibly tall and skeletal, huddled around a pulsating mass of writhing tentacles. In their midst, a crew member, his face contorted in unspeakable terror. My scream died in my throat as the figures turned towards me, their hollow eyes filled with an ancient hunger. I stumbled back, camera falling to the floor with a clatter. In that split second, a grotesque tentacle lashed out, wrapping around the crew member and dragging him, shrieking, into the pulsating mass. Panic propelled me forward. I sprinted blindly down the corridors, the monstrous figures in hot pursuit. The rhythmic tapping filled the air, a relentless drumbeat of doom. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I couldn't stop. Just as I thought they'd catch me, I burst through a hatch onto the deserted upper deck. The icy wind whipped at my face, momentarily clearing my head. Below, the figures swarmed out of the metal door, their guttural screeches echoing across the desolate deck. I knew escape by conventional means was impossible. This wasn't a malfunctioning ship. It was a vessel of horrors, a gateway to some unspeakable dimension. With a desperate prayer, I grabbed a life preserver and jumped. The frigid water stole my breath, the impact like 1,000 needles. But it was a small price to pay for escape. As I bobbed in the unforgiving waves, the monstrous figures lined the railing, their inhuman screeches fading as the distance grew. I was adrift, alone, at the mercy of the elements. But for the first time since setting foot on this cursed ship, I wasn't afraid. The icy water felt like a baptism, washing away the terror, the violation. The cruise ship, a dark silhouette against the horizon, slowly receded, a monument to my shattered dreams and a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurk just beyond the veil of reality. The rhythmic thrum of the engines had become my white noise, a constant companion lulling me into a false sense of security. As a social media manager for a trendy new cruise line, the Pacific Pearl, my days were a whirlwind of crafting captivating content. Impossibly blue water cascading down waterfalls, couples basking on pristine beaches, and endless buffets overflowing with exotic delicacies. It was all sunshine and smiles for the outside world, but beneath the surface, a creeping unease had settled in my gut. It started with fleeting glitches on the ship's Wi-Fi. Edited photos would appear warped, faces contorted in disturbing ways. I brushed it off as a software issue, rerunning uploads until the smiles reappeared, normal and toothy. Then came the whispers. On late-night strolls through the deserted decks, I'd catch snippets of hushed conversations in a language I didn't recognize, a language that seemed to vibrate against my very bones. The unease solidified into fear the night I received a private message on the company app, an app accessible only to crew and staff. It was a single image, a photo I'd uploaded earlier that day, a picture of myself grinning on the Lido deck, now grotesquely distorted. My smile was stretched into a rictus, my eyes vacant black holes. Panic clawed at my throat as I frantically deleted the message, the image burning into my memory. I confided in a friendly bartender, a weathered sailor named Miguel, who listened with a furrowed brow. "They call them the mimics," he muttered, his voice laced with a gravelly fear. "They feed on fear, on negative energy. Don't let them see it." Fear, it seemed, was the currency on this ship, and I was starting to feel dangerously low on funds. The messages escalated. Edited photos of fellow crew members, their faces twisted into masks of despair. Videos I never recorded, showing deserted corridors filled with flitting shadows. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Every creak of the ship, every groan of the hull, echoing the growing terror within. Then came the disappearances. A waiter, friendly and jovial just yesterday, vanished without a trace. His nameplate and belongings simply gone, as if he'd never existed. Panic turned into a suffocating paranoia. Was I next? Driven by desperation, I delved into the ship's restricted network, a labyrinth of cryptic files and access codes. My heart hammered in my chest as I stumbled upon a hidden forum, filled with frantic messages from past crew members, all describing the mimics, the fear, the disappearances. One message, however, offered a glimmer of hope. It spoke of a hidden chamber deep within the bowels of the ship, a place where the mimics could be banished. Armed with this sliver of information and a heart full of reckless courage, I ventured into the ship's underbelly, a maze of flickering lights and oppressive machinery. Following cryptic clues from the forum, I reached a heavy metal door, a stark contrast to the utilitarian surroundings. The air grew thick and oppressive, the metallic tang heavy on my tongue. As I placed a hand on the cold metal, a voice slithered through the corridor, a voice that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. It whispered promises of oblivion, of release from my terror. Terror threatened to consume me, but the image of the vanished crew members spurred me on. With a deep breath, I punched in the access code gleaned from the forum. The door hissed open, revealing a swirling vortex of inky blackness. The voice reached a crescendo, a chilling symphony of despair. Taking a flying leap of faith, I hurled my phone, the source of the disturbing messages, into the vortex. A deafening shriek erupted, followed by an eerie silence. The door slammed shut with a resounding clang. Had I done it? Returning to the crew quarters, I found a sense of normalcy restored. The whispers had ceased, the Wi-Fi glitches were gone. Miguel looked at me with a mixture of relief and suspicion. "You wouldn't happen to know where the Wi-Fi gremlins went, would you?" he asked with a wry smile. I smiled back, a genuine smile this time. The Pacific Pearl continued her journey, a beacon of luxury on the vast ocean. But for me, the idyllic facade had been shattered. I knew the darkness still lurked beneath the surface, a chilling reminder that even the most picture-perfect paradise could hide a terrifying secret. The Borealis didn't lull me to sleep anymore. Instead, its once familiar thrum morphed into a frantic heartbeat, a counterpoint to the icy dread that had gripped the ship. As a cryptozoologist, I'd signed up for the Arctic expedition with a thirst for discovery, a chance to finally document the elusive kraken, a leviathan whispered about in firelight tales for centuries. Now, adrift in the frozen wasteland of the Beaufort Sea, that thirst had curdled into a bone-deep terror. It began with whispers, not on the wind, but carried by the groaning steel hull itself. Eerie chants, sung in an unknown tongue, echoed through the deserted corridors on starless nights. Then came the dreams, vivid nightmares of colossal tentacles crashing through the ice, their suckers oozing a bioluminescent slime that pulsed with an unnatural rhythm. I dismissed them as stress, the pressure of leading the expedition gnawing at my sanity. But the crew's hushed tones and nervous glances when I mentioned the chants told a different story. One particularly desolate afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the ice floes in shades of bruised purple and arterial red, the silence was broken by a blood-curdling shriek. It tore through the ship like a banshee's wail, echoing through the metal corridors and sending a primal fear clawing at my insides. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Every creak of the hull groaning under the weight of the ice, every groan of unseen machinery, amplified the terror gnawing at my sanity. The next morning, news spread like wildfire through the hushed whispers. Viktor Petrov, the ship's gruff but experienced first mate, had vanished from his watch post on the crow's nest. His coat and binoculars lay abandoned on the icy deck, a stark silhouette against the desolate landscape, a stark reminder of his sudden disappearance. The captain, a weathered man with a stoic demeanor etched with worry lines, addressed a pale and shaken crew. "Search parties are being organized," he announced, his voice tight. "Victor will be found." But a part of me knew that wasn't true. This wasn't a case of an experienced sailor slipping overboard during a storm. This was something far more sinister. The whispers in the corridors intensified, morphing into a guttural, rhythmic chanting that resonated deep within my bones. It spoke of an ancient hunger, a leviathan awakening from its slumber beneath the icy depths, driven by a desperate need for answers and a sliver of hope for Victor. I delved into the ship's restricted archives, a labyrinth of dusty files and faded photographs. Nestled deep within a brittle, leather-bound journal pinned by a previous captain, I found a chilling account of a similar encounter. It spoke of a kraken, a monstrous cephalopod capable of swallowing ships whole, but not by brute force. It was drawn by a specific bioluminescent signature emitted by the ship's outdated navigation system, a signature that mimicked the bioluminescence of deep-sea creatures, its prey. The final entry was chillingly brief: "Change the light, or the darkness consumes us all." Armed with this horrifying knowledge, I knew what I had to do. But disabling the archaic navigation system wouldn't be easy. The control room was heavily guarded, access restricted to a select few engineers. Panic threatened to consume me, but the image of Victor's abandoned coat on the icy deck fueled a reckless plan. The relentless thrum of the engines on the Aurora Australis used to be a comforting constant, a steady heartbeat lulling me to sleep beneath the mesmerizing dance of the Southern Lights. Now, on this research vessel venturing into the uncharted territories of the Amundsen Sea, it was a nervous tremor, a constant reminder of the icy isolation that gripped us. As a glaciologist, I dreamt of this expedition, a chance to unravel the mysteries of the rapidly receding glaciers and their impact on rising sea levels. But lately, a disquietude as vast and unforgiving as the surrounding ice shelves had settled on the ship. It started with fleeting glimpses, eerie shadows flitting at the edge of my vision in the periphery, only to vanish when I turned to face them. Strange symbols, etched in an unfamiliar language, appeared scrawled on frosted windows overnight, then vanished just as mysteriously the next morning. The crew, a hardy bunch accustomed to the harsh realities of polar exploration, became eerily quiet, their usual camaraderie replaced by a tense silence that hung heavy in the air. One particularly desolate night, fueled by a potent blend of anxiety and insomnia, I found myself drawn to the ship's restricted archive. Nestled deep within the metallic labyrinth, the air thick with the musty scent of old paper, I stumbled upon a brittle, leather-bound journal. Its faded ink spoke of a previous expedition, one that met a chilling fate in these very waters. They described monstrous creatures, beings of pure ice and shadow, drawn to the living warmth humans exuded. The final entry ended abruptly, a single, chilling sentence scrawled across the page. "They are awakening." A cold dread gripped me as I slammed the book shut. The whispers in the corridors morphed into guttural growls. The shadows solidified into fleeting glimpses of elongated, skeletal figures lurking at the edges of the ship's decks. Panic clawed at my throat, the isolation of the Antarctic amplified by the growing sense of dread. Then came the disappearances. A seasoned sailor vanished from his watch post without a trace. His tools, abandoned haphazardly on the deck, the only evidence of his abrupt absence. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Every creak of the ship, every groan of the hull, echoing the rising terror within. Driven by a desperate need to understand, I delved deeper into the archive. Buried beneath layers of historical data, I found a weathered map, its edges frayed and its markings cryptic. It depicted a hidden chamber, deep within the belly of the ship, rumored to house an ancient artifact, a shard of a celestial meteorite, said to hold the power to banish the icy denizens. Armed with this sliver of hope and a heart full of reckless courage, I ventured into the ship's underbelly, a maze of flickering lights and oppressive machinery. Following the cryptic clues from the map, I reached a heavy metal door, its surface etched with the same symbols that had haunted me. As I placed a hand on the cold metal, the air grew thick and oppressive, the icy ting heavy on my tongue. A voice, a chilling chorus that seemed to emanate from the frozen depths of the ship itself, whispered promises of oblivion, of becoming one with the ice. Terror threatened to consume me, but the image of the vanished sailor spurred me on. With a deep breath, I punched in the access code gleaned from the map. The door hissed open, revealing a cavernous chamber dominated by a pulsating shard of obsidian-like material, emanating a cold blue light. The voice reached a crescendo, a chilling symphony of despair. Taking a flying leap of faith, I propelled myself towards the shard, its icy touch searing through my gloves. As I grasped it, a blinding flash engulfed the chamber, followed by an eerie silence. The door slammed shut with a resounding clang. Had I done it? Returning to the crew quarters, a sense of cautious optimism filled the air. The whispers had ceased, the unsettling shadows were gone. The captain, a gruff man weathered by years at sea, looked at me with a mixture of relief and suspicion. "Seems you found our little secret, haven't you?" he muttered, his voice laced with a newfound respect. The Aurora Australis continued her journey, a beacon of scientific curiosity amidst the unforgiving landscape. But for me, the pristine beauty of the Antarctic was forever tainted. I knew the icy denizens still slumbered beneath the frozen expanse, their awakening merely delayed. They were a chilling reminder that the secrets buried beneath the Earth's surface and within ourselves were best left undisturbed. The shard of the meteorite now hung heavy around my neck, a constant reminder of the price of knowledge and the razor-thin line between scientific exploration and unleashing forces beyond our comprehension. The rhythmic thrum of the leviathan beneath me was once a lullaby, a constant hum of gentle travel. Now, On this so-called luxury Red Sea expedition cruise, the ocean majesty, it was a maddening tremor, a counterpoint to the growing unease that gnawed at my gut. As a historian specializing in ancient languages, I'd been lured by the promise of deciphering a newly discovered inscription on a remote island. But the inscription was just the tip of a terrifying iceberg. It began subtly, eerie chants, sung in an unknown tongue, echoed through the deserted corridors at night. Then came the dreams, vivid nightmares of faceless figures with glowing eyes, beckoning me from the depths of the Red Sea. I dismissed them as stress, the pressure of deciphering the inscription getting to me. But the crew's hushed tones and nervous glances when I mentioned the chants told a different story. One particularly sweltering afternoon, curiosity wrestled control of my fear. Following the source of the chants, I found myself on a rarely used deck, its paint peeling, the air thick with the smell of salt and something metallic. A heavy, rusted hatch stood at the far end, adorned with strange symbols that mirrored the inscription I was struggling to decipher. Despite a primal urge to turn back, I descended a rickety metal ladder into the ship's underbelly. The air grew thick and oppressive, the metallic tang heavy on my tongue. The flickering emergency lights cast an unsettling glow on a labyrinth of pipes and forgotten equipment. As I navigated the maze, the chanting grew louder, rhythmic pulse that vibrated through my bones. Finally, I reached a massive steel door, the symbols from the hatch etched onto its surface, pulsing with an eerie orange light. Panic clawed at my throat. This was no malfunctioning air conditioning or a prank by bored crew members. This was something ancient and malevolent. Before I could flee, the door groaned open, revealing a sight that sent chills down my spine. A vast cavern stretched before me, its walls adorned with the same unsettling symbols. In the center, a swirling vortex of crimson light pulsed, emanating a low, throbbing hum. Around the vortex, figures writhed in a macabre dance. Skeletal forms, draped in tattered robes, their vacant eyes burning with an unnatural orange glow. Their guttural chanting filled the chamber, a language that resonated with a primal fear within me. It was the language from the inscription, the language from my nightmares. Terror propelled me backwards. I slammed the door shut just as the figures lunged forward, their skeletal appendages reaching through the crack. My heart hammered in my chest as I stumbled back through the maze, the chants echoing in my ears. Back in my cabin, I frantically researched the inscription, a desperate search for any clue as to what I'd witnessed. The answer I found was horrifying. The inscription spoke of an ancient gateway, a portal to a realm of hungry entities kept in check by an artifact, the heart of the Red Sea, a ruby rumored to be hidden somewhere on board. The final line spoke of a ritual, a summoning that could only be broken if the artifact was placed back within the gateway. Armed with this knowledge and a newfound resolve, I delved deeper into the ship's history, piecing together the location of the heart. It was hidden in the captain's quarters, a magnificent gem resting on a velvet cushion. Stealing the heart felt wrong, but the alternative was unthinkable. As I raced towards the gateway, the chanting reached a crescendo. The door bulged inwards, the skeletal figures straining to break through. With a desperate prayer, I shoved the heart into the pulsating vortex. A blinding flash filled the chamber, followed by an eerie silence. The door slammed shut, the orange glow fading. The crew emerged from hiding, their faces etched with relief and terror. The captain, a weathered man with a haunted look in his eyes, grasped my shoulder. "You did what we couldn't," he rasped. "Thank you." The ocean majesty continued its journey, a glistening vessel gliding on the turquoise waters of the Red Sea. But for me, the idyllic facade was shattered. I knew the entities still lurked beyond the gateway, forever tethered to this place. As I gazed at the setting sun, casting long shadows across the water, a single, glowing ember flickered on the horizon, a chilling reminder of the darkness that slumbered just beneath the surface. The incessant hiss of the Tesla wasn't a comforting white noise anymore. It was a constant reminder of the oppressive heat and the unsettling silence that had gripped the once bustling research vessel. As an astrophysicist leading a groundbreaking experiment on solar energy harvesting, I'd envisioned scorching days tempered by the thrill of discovery. Now, adrift in the vast emptiness of the Atakama desert, the scorching sun felt like a malevolent presence, and discovery had morphed into a gnawing dread. It began subtly. Eerie flickers in the normally steady hum of the ship's solar panels, brief outages that plunged the labs into momentary darkness. Then came the dreams, vivid nightmares of monstrous, serpentine creatures with glowing red eyes, slithering across the barren landscape and draining the life force from everything they touched. I dismissed them as stress, the pressure of the project and the relentless desert heat taking their toll. But the crew's hushed tones and nervous glances when I mentioned the flickers told a different story. One particularly sweltering afternoon, as the sun beat down mercilessly, the silence was shattered by a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the steel corridors. It sent a jolt of terror through me, shattering the fragile illusion of safety. Sleep became a desperate hope. Every groan of the ship straining against the relentless heat, every creak of the metal hull, amplified the unease festering within. The next day, the news spread like wildfire through the hushed whispers. Dr. Vargas, a brilliant but eccentric xenobotanist, had vanished from his lab. His equipment lay scattered on the floor, untouched, as if he'd simply ceased to exist. The captain, a weathered woman with a sun-baked face etched with worry lines, addressed a pale and shaken crew. "Search parties are being organized," she announced, her voice tight. "Dr. Vargas will be found." But a part of me knew that wasn't true. This wasn't a case of a scientist succumbing to the harsh desert environment. This was something far more sinister. The whispers in the corridors intensified, morphing into a guttural hissing that sent shivers down my spine. They spoke of the drainers, creatures from beyond the veil, drawn to the Tesla's immense energy field, feeding on its life force. Driven by a desperate need for answers and a flicker of hope for Dr. Vargas, I delved into the ship's restricted archives, a digital labyrinth of classified data and encrypted files. Nestled deep within a password-protected report compiled by a previous research team, I found a chilling account. It spoke of the drainers, extra-dimensional entities who feasted on energy, lured by strong electromagnetic fields. The final entry was a chilling warning: reduce the energy output. It's the only way to sever the connection. Armed with this horrifying knowledge, I knew what I had to do. But reducing the Tesla's energy output meant jeopardizing the entire experiment, the very reason we were stranded in this desolate wasteland. The control center was heavily guarded, access restricted to a select few engineers. Panic gnawed at the edges of my resolve, but the image of Dr. Vargas' abandoned lab fueled a reckless plan. Feigning a sudden illness, I stumbled dramatically out of the mess hall, clutching my stomach. As the ship's doctor rushed to my aid, I slipped past him, weaving through the metallic corridors like a hunted animal. Reaching the control center, I punched in a random string of codes, hoping for a miracle. The klaxons blared, red emergency lights strobing the room. The door hissed open, revealing a startled technician, a young woman with wide, fearful eyes. In a blur of motion, I explained the situation, my voice hoarse with urgency. The technician, thankfully a believer in fringe theories, understood. With trembling hands, she followed my frantic instructions, overriding the automated systems and reducing the Tesla's energy output to a trickle. An unnatural silence descended, broken only by the ragged gasps of my own breath. Moments later, a blood-curdling shriek tore through the silence, followed by a series of sickening thuds. My stomach lurched, but I forced myself to stay still. After what felt like an eternity, the silence returned, heavy and oppressive. We flickered on the auxiliary lights, revealing an empty control room. Relief washed over me, tinged with a deep sadness for Dr. Vargas. The remaining days of the experiment were shrouded in a somber mood. The missing scientist was a constant reminder of the lurking horror just beyond the shimmering heat waves. The crew, initially wary of my actions, grew surprisingly respectful. The captain, her voice gruff with gratitude, presented me with a data chip containing the modified experiment protocols. The Tesla limped back to civilization, a vessel scarred not just by the encounter with the drainers, but by the chilling knowledge of what lurked just beyond the veil of reality. The scorching sun beat down on the desolate landscape as the Tesla crawled towards the distant horizon, a solitary speck against the endless expanse of the Atakama. The data chip felt heavy in my hand, a constant reminder of the sacrifice Dr. Vargas had made and the terrifying truth we had unearthed. The project, once a beacon of hope for a sustainable future, now felt tainted. Back at the research facility, the recovered data was met with a mixture of skepticism and morbid curiosity. The existence of extra-dimensional entities feeding on energy was a concept too fantastical for many to swallow. Yet, the inexplicable disappearance of Dr. Vargas and the undeniable fluctuations in the energy field during the incident were undeniable. The project was officially shut down, deemed too risky to continue. But for me, the horror wasn't confined to the scorching sands of the Atakama. It had seeped into my dreams, a recurring nightmare of serpentine creatures with glowing eyes slithering through the sterile corridors of the research facility, their bodies crackling with stolen energy. Sleep became a luxury I could barely afford, the silence punctuated by the phantom hiss of the Tesla and the echo of the blood-curdling scream. One starless night, while poring over the recovered data, a single line of code jumped out at me, a fragment missed during the initial analysis. It was a fragmented message, seemingly embedded within the energy signature fluctuations. A warning. The veil is thin. We are not alone. They hunger still. A cold dread washed over me. The reduced energy output might have repelled the drainers for now, but it hadn't banished them. They were still out there, beyond the veil, waiting for an opportunity to exploit humanity's insatiable hunger for power. The knowledge gnawed at me, a chilling secret I couldn't share. The world wasn't ready for the truth, a truth that could shatter the illusion of safety and plunge us into a new era of fear. The rhythmic hum of the city outside my window no longer felt comforting. It was a constant reminder of our dependence on a power source that could very well be our undoing. The data chip felt heavy in my hand, not just a scientific record, but a burden of knowledge. I was now a sentinel, forever vigilant, forever haunted by the horrors that lurked just beyond the veil, waiting for the opportune moment to break through. The incessant whir of the Hermes wasn't a lullaby anymore. It was a frantic counterpoint to the growing unease that had gripped the once jovial crew. As a xenolinguist, I'd signed up for the mission to Europa, Jupiter's icy moon, with a heart full of anticipation, a chance to decipher the enigmatic messages broadcasted from its subsurface ocean. Now, trapped in a perpetual twilight orbit around the moon's surface, anticipation had curdled into a bone-deep dread. It began with fleeting glimpses, shadows flitting across the viewport windows, too fast for the human eye to register, but leaving behind a faint bioluminescent afterglow. Then came the recordings, the rhythmic, almost melodic chirps and clicks emanating from the European ocean, messages that had initially fueled our excitement, now morphing into a symphony of unsettling dissonance. The seasoned crew, a stoic bunch hardened by years of space travel, became eerily quiet. Their usual camaraderie vanished, replaced by a haunted look in their eyes and a tremor in their hands whenever I brought up the messages. One particularly desolate night, the silence aboard the Hermes was broken by a blood-curdling shriek that echoed through the sterile corridors. It sent a jolt of terror through me, shattering the fragile illusion of safety. Sleep became a desperate hope, every groan of the ship groaning under the immense pressure of the Jovian magnetosphere. Every hiss of the life support system amplified the terror gnawing at my sanity. The next morning, news spread like wildfire through the hushed whispers. Dr. Patel, the brilliant but eccentric astrobiologist leading the mission, had vanished from his lab. His equipment lay scattered on the floor, untouched, as if he'd simply ceased to exist. The captain, a weathered man with a stoic demeanor etched with worry lines, addressed a pale and shaken crew. "Search parties are being organized," he announced, his voice tight. "Dr. Patel will be found." But a part of me knew that wasn't true. This wasn't a case of a scientist succumbing to the harsh vacuum of space. This was something far more sinister. The messages from the European Ocean intensified, morphing into a cacophony of guttural growls and screeches that resonated deep within my bones. They spoke of a hunger, an ancient intelligence awakening from its slumber beneath the icy surface. Driven by a desperate need for answers and a sliver of hope for Dr. Patel, I delved into the ship's restricted archives, a digital labyrinth of classified data and mission reports. Nestled deep within a password-protected file compiled by a previous Europa mission, I found a chilling account. It spoke of a leviathan, a colossal creature dwelling in the European Ocean, capable of manipulating bioluminescence and telepathic communication. The final entry was a stark warning: do not respond. It hungers for knowledge. Silence is your only defense. Armed with this horrifying knowledge, I knew what I had to do. But stopping the ongoing communication with the European Ocean meant jeopardizing the entire mission, the very reason we were braving the treacherous Jovian radiation belts. The communication hub, a high-security zone, was heavily guarded, access restricted to a select few engineers. Panic threatened to consume me, but the image of Dr. Patel's abandoned lab fueled a reckless plan. Feigning a sudden system malfunction, I triggered a series of flashing red lights and blaring alarms in the communication hub. As the engineers scrambled to contain the non-existent crisis, I slipped past them, a ghost in the metallic labyrinth. Reaching the control center, I punched in a predetermined override code, a backdoor I discovered while studying the restricted files. The klaxons blared louder, red emergency lights strobing the sterile room. The door hissed open, revealing two startled engineers, their faces etched with confusion. In a blur of motion, I explained the situation, my voice hoarse with urgency. The engineers, thankfully more receptive than I'd anticipated, understood the gravity of the situation. With trembling hands, they followed my instructions, severing the communication link with the European Ocean. An unnatural silence descended, broken only by the ragged gasps of my own breath. Moments later, a blood-curdling shriek, unlike anything I'd ever heard, tore through the silence, vibrating through the very hull of the Hermes. The ship lurched violently, alarms blaring anew. My stomach lurched, but I forced myself to stay still. After what felt like an eternity, the silence returned, heavy and oppressive. We flickered on the auxiliary lights, revealing the control room untouched. Relief washed over me, tinged with a deep sadness for Dr. Patel. The remaining days of the mission were shrouded in a somber mood. The missing scientist was a constant reminder of the lurking horror beneath the icy surface. The crew, initially wary of my actions, grew surprisingly respectful. The captain, his voice gruff with gratitude, presented me with a commemorative plaque for my bravery and resourcefulness. But the plaque felt like a cold comfort in the face of the chilling truth we now carried. The Hermes limped back to Earth, a vessel scarred not just by the encounter with the Leviathan, but by the chilling knowledge of what lurked beneath the icy surface of Europa. The mission data was deemed inconclusive, the recordings of the messages classified as anomalous phenomena. Only a select few of us knew the truth. Back on Earth, the weight of that knowledge pressed heavily on me. I couldn't share it openly, for fear of mass panic and a halt to all future space exploration. Yet, silence gnawed at my conscience. The Leviathan, with its hunger for knowledge, was still out there, a silent threat lurking in the vast expanse of space. One night, under the familiar blanket of Earth's stars, so different from the alien glow of Jupiter's moons, I decided to act. I anonymously leaked a fraction of the data, a heavily redacted snippet of the messages, to a fringe scientific organization known for its pursuit of the unexplained. It was a gamble, a desperate plea for someone, somewhere, to understand the true nature of the threat. The leak caused a stir within the scientific community, sparking debates about the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence. But without concrete evidence, it remained a fringe theory. Still, a seed of doubt had been planted. Years passed, filled with a constant, gnawing anxiety. Every new space exploration mission, every probe sent towards Europa, filled me with dread. Then, one day, a news report sent a jolt through me. They were sending a new mission to Europa, equipped with advanced AI capable of deciphering complex communication patterns. Sleep abandoned me that night. The thought of the AI interacting with the leviathan, unwittingly feeding its hunger for knowledge, filled me with terror. I knew I had to act, but how? My options were limited. Finally, I reached a desperate decision. Hacking into the mission control systems, a skill I'd never thought I'd use again. I placed a single line of code within the AI's programming. Do not respond. Silence is your only defense. It was a gamble, but it was all I had. The news of the mission's success reached me weeks later. They'd managed to collect valuable data on Europa's subsurface ocean, but the communication attempts had yielded nothing but static. Relief washed over me, a tidal wave that left me weak and trembling. The secret remained buried, a chilling truth locked away within a handful of us. The leviathan, for now, slumbered beneath the ice, its hunger temporarily satiated by the vast ocean of human knowledge available in the cosmos. But I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the silence wouldn't last forever. The universe held secrets beyond our comprehension, and some hungers were never truly sated. The rhythmic hum of the Andromeda wasn't a lullaby anymore. It was a constant thrumming tension wire against my already frayed nerves. As a deep-sea photographer for this cutting-edge research vessel, the initial thrill of exploring uncharted hydrothermal vents in the Mariana Trench had given way to a gnawing sense of dread. It started subtly, like phantom chills that raced down my spine despite the tropical heat. Then came the flickering lights, brief stints of darkness that plunged the sterile corridors into an unsettling gloom. The crew, a stoic bunch hardened by years at sea, began sporting worried glances and muttering amongst themselves in hushed tones whenever I was near. One particularly oppressive night, the silence was broken by a blood-curdling shriek that echoed through the steel labyrinth of the ship. It sent a jolt of terror through me, shattering the fragile illusion of safety. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Every creak of the hull, every groan of unseen machinery seemed to amplify the growing unease within. The following morning, the news spread like wildfire. Dr. Nakamura, a brilliant but eccentric marine biologist leading the expedition, had vanished from his lab. His equipment lay scattered, untouched, as if he'd simply ceased to exist. The captain, a weathered man with a salt and pepper beard etched with worry lines, addressed the crew with a forced bravado that couldn't mask the fear in his eyes. "Search parties are being organized," he announced, his voice tight. "Dr. Nakamura will be found." But a part of me knew that wasn't true. This wasn't a case of a scientist slipping overboard during a late-night observation. This was something far more sinister. The whispers in the corridors intensified, morphing into a cacophony of guttural sounds that sent shivers down my spine. They spoke of the others, denizens of the abyss who were drawn to the light, to the warmth of human life. Driven by a morbid curiosity and a flicker of hope for Dr. Nakamura, I delved into the ship's restricted archives. Buried beneath layers of classified documents, I found a dog-eared logbook pinned by a previous captain. It spoke of a similar incident, of a creature from the depths, lured aboard by the ship's bioluminescent technology, a creature that fed on human life force. The final entry was chillingly brief: sacrifice the light. It's the only way. Armed with this horrifying knowledge, I knew what I had to do. The bioluminescent technology, the pride and joy of the Andromeda, was the beacon drawing these entities from the inky depths. But how to disable it? The control center was heavily guarded, access restricted to a select few. Desperation fueled a reckless plan. I staged a medical emergency, collapsing dramatically in the middle of the mess hall. As the crew rushed to my aid, I slipped away, weaving through metallic corridors, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Reaching the control center, I punched in a random string of codes, hoping for a miracle. The klaxons blared, red emergency lights strobing the room. The door hissed open, revealing a technician frozen in shock. In a blur of motion, I explained the situation, my voice hoarse with urgency. The technician, a young woman with wide, fearful eyes, understood. With trembling hands, she followed my instructions, plunging the entire ship into darkness. An unnatural silence descended, broken only by the ragged gasps of my own breath. Moments later, a blood-curdling shriek tore through the darkness, followed by a series of sickening thuds. My stomach lurched, but I forced myself to stay still. After what felt like an eternity, the silence returned, heavy and oppressive. We flickered on the auxiliary lights, revealing an empty control room. Relief washed over me, tinged with a deep sadness for Dr. Nakamura. The remaining days of the expedition were shrouded in a somber mood. The missing scientist was a constant reminder of the lurking horror just beyond the hull. The crew, initially wary of my actions, grew surprisingly respectful. The captain, his voice gruff with gratitude, presented me with a commemorative plaque for my bravery. The Andromeda limped back to port, a vessel scarred not just by the encounter with the abyss, but by the chilling knowledge of what lurked beneath the waves. As I disembarked, the vast expanse of the ocean stretched before me, a majestic beauty forever tainted by the memory of the others. The rhythmic hum of the receding ship was a haunting melody, a constant reminder of the darkness that awaited, just out of sight, in the crushing depths of the Mariana Trench. The rhythmic thrum of the Orpheus wasn't a lullaby anymore. It was a death knell echoing through the rusted corridors of the abandoned research vessel. As a paranormal investigator, I'd signed up for the expedition to the Mariana Trench with a heart full of skepticism, a chance to debunk the myths surrounding the gates of hell, rumored hydrothermal vents spewing otherworldly phenomena. Now, trapped miles beneath the crushing pressure of the ocean floor, skepticism had curdled into a bone-deep terror. It began with flickers of light, an unnatural bioluminescence emanating from the abyss beyond the viewport windows. The light pulsed with a hypnotic rhythm, and the crew, a hardened bunch of submersible pilots and marine biologists, grew inexplicably jumpy. Whispers of a bottomless hunger began circulating, a chilling premonition that sent shivers down my spine despite the tropical heat trapped within the Orpheus. One particularly oppressive night, the silence was shattered by a blood-curdling shriek that tore through the metal hull like a banshee's wail. It ripped through my dreams, replacing them with visions of monstrous tentacles and gnashing maws reaching for the Orpheus. Sleep became a desperate luxury. Every groan of the submersible under the immense pressure, every hiss of the life support system, amplified the terror gnawing at my sanity. The next morning, the news spread like a virus through the tense whispers. Dr. Nakamura, the brilliant but eccentric marine biologist leading the expedition, had vanished from his lab. His equipment lay scattered, untouched, as if he'd been snatched into the abyss. The captain, a weathered woman with a face etched by the sea's harsh embrace, addressed a pale and shaken crew. "Search is impossible," she announced, her voice hoarse. Dr. Nakamura is presumed lost, but a part of me knew that wasn't true. This wasn't a case of an accident or equipment malfunction. This was something far more sinister. The unnatural light pulsated with renewed intensity, and the whispers morphed into a guttural, rhythmic chanting that resonated deep within my bones. It spoke of an ancient evil, a leviathan slumbering within the gates of hell, awakened by the Orpheus intrusion. Driven by a morbid curiosity and a flicker of hope for Dr. Nakamura, I delved into the ship's restricted archives, a digital tomb of classified data and forgotten reports. Nestled deep within a password-protected file compiled by a previous Mariana Trench expedition, I found a chilling account. It spoke of a monstrous entity, a creature of pure energy that feasted on the life force of anything that dared approach the gates of hell. The final entry was a stark warning: do not engage. Silence is your only defense. Armed with this horrifying knowledge, I knew what I had to do. But deactivating the Orpheus sonar, the very tool attracting the entity, meant jeopardizing the entire mission. The control center, a high-security zone, was heavily guarded, access restricted to a select few engineers. Panic threatened to consume me, but the image of Dr. Nakamura's abandoned lab fueled a reckless plan. Feigning a sudden equipment malfunction, I triggered a series of flashing red lights and blaring alarms in the control center. As the engineers scrambled to contain the non-existent crisis, I slipped past them, a ghost in the metallic labyrinth. Reaching the control center, my heart hammered against my ribs. With trembling hands, I punched in a predetermined override code, a backdoor I discovered buried within the classified files. The klaxons blared louder, red emergency lights strobing the sterile room. The door hissed open, revealing two startled engineers, their faces etched with confusion. In a blur of motion, I explained the situation, my voice hoarse with urgency. The engineers, thankfully more receptive than I'd anticipated, understood the gravity of the situation. With trembling hands, they followed my instructions, plunging the Orpheus into an unnatural silence. The only sound was the ragged gasps of my own breath. Moments later, a blood-curdling shriek, unlike anything I'd ever heard, tore through the silence, vibrating through the very hull of the Orpheus. The submersible lurched violently, alarms blaring anew. My stomach lurched, but I forced myself to stay still. After what felt like an eternity, the silence returned, heavy and oppressive. We flickered on the emergency lights, revealing the control room untouched. Relief washed over me, tinged with a deep sadness for Dr. Nakamura. The remaining days of the expedition were shrouded in a somber mood. Missing the scientist was a constant reminder of the lurking terror in the abyss. The crew, initially wary of my actions, grew surprisingly respectful. The captain, her voice gruff with gratitude, presented me with a commemorative plaque for my bravery and resourcefulness. But the plaque felt like a cold comfort in the face of the chilling truth we now carried. The Orpheus limped back to the surface, a vessel scarred not just by the encounter with the entity, but by the weight of the knowledge that lurked within the Mariana Trench. The official reports downplayed the incident, attributing Dr. Nakamura's disappearance to a tragic equipment failure and the mission's abrupt end to unforeseen technical difficulties. The data we salvaged, including the horrifying recordings of the entity's chant, was deemed too sensitive for public release. It was buried deep within the bowels of a clandestine government agency, a chilling secret entrusted to a select few. I returned to a world bathed in sunlight, a world blissfully unaware of the horrors that slumbered beneath the waves. Yet, the memory of the entity's pulsating light and the blood-curdling shriek haunted my dreams. Sleep became a battlefield, a constant struggle against the terrors of the deep. One starless night, while poring over the classified data in a secured government facility, a single line of code within the entity's chant jumped out at me, a fragment missed during the initial analysis. It was a fragmented message, seemingly embedded within the guttural sounds, a warning. The silence is temporary. We hunger still. The gates will open. A cold dread washed over me. Disabling the sonar had bought us time, but it hadn't banished the entity. It was still out there, in the inky depths, biding its time, waiting for the opportune moment to breach the gates of hell and unleash its hunger upon the world. The knowledge gnawed at me, a chilling secret that I couldn't share. The world, basking in its ignorance, continued its march towards progress, its insatiable hunger for energy mirrored by the entity's own. Every new deep-sea exploration project, every attempt to harness the immense power of the ocean floor, sent shivers down my spine. I became a silent sentinel, an observer forever haunted by the horrors of the trench, constantly monitoring deep-sea activity for any sign of the entity's awakening. Years passed, a constant vigil punctuated by fleeting moments of normalcy. Then, one day, a frantic call from the government agency shattered the fragile peace. A new deep-sea mining operation, ignoring warnings and fueled by corporate greed, had stumbled upon the gates of hell. The readings were off the charts, an unnatural energy signature pulsating from the abyss. They needed me, the one who had glimpsed the horror firsthand. With a heavy heart, I knew this was the moment I'd been dreading. The silence was over. The gates were opening, and I, the unlikely hero burdened with a terrifying secret, was humanity's only hope against the leviathan stirring in the depths. The rhythmic thrum of the engines on the Danube Whisper was once a lullaby, but now, on this sweltering Amazon cruise, it was a relentless drumbeat against the oppressive humidity. As a wildlife researcher, this expedition was a dream come true, a chance to document the vibrant tapestry of life in the rainforest canopy. But lately, a disquieting dissonance had woven itself into the symphony of the jungle. It began subtly. Chilling melodies, not quite music, resonated through the metal walls of my cabin at night. Eerie whispers seemed to follow me through the ship's deserted corridors, a language that tickled the edges of my memory, yet remained frustratingly out of reach. Then came the photos, blank slates where vibrant birds of paradise should have been, replaced by swirling static in every image captured above the main deck. Initially, I blamed faulty equipment, the rainforest's notorious interference messing with my camera's sensors. But the crew's hushed tones and nervous glances when I mentioned the photos told a different story. Their forced smiles couldn't hide the unease that flickered in their eyes. One particularly humid night, curiosity gnawed at the edges of my fear. Following the source of the unsettling melodies, I found myself on a rarely used deck, its paint peeling, the air thick with the smell of mildew and something metallic. A heavy wooden door, gnarled and ancient, stood at the far end. As I inched closer, the music intensified, a cacophony of discordant notes that seemed to vibrate within my skull. Against my better judgment, I pushed the door open. A wave of fetid air washed over me, the stench of decay and damp earth assaulting my senses. The room was bathed in a sickly green glow emanating from the center, a pulsating mass of tangled vines and roots woven into a grotesque, pulsating heart. And around it, figures stirred, not human, yet vaguely familiar. Skeletal forms, draped in tattered remnants of indigenous clothing, their hollow eyes fixed on me with an insatiable hunger. Panic clawed at my throat. This wasn't a malfunctioning camera or a storm playing havoc with the Wi-Fi. This was a nightmare made real, a gateway to something ancient and malevolent. Before the horrifying creatures could react, I slammed the door shut, the raw wood splintering under the force. I sprinted blindly down the corridor, the monstrous entities pounding against the door in pursuit. Their guttural screeches echoed in the confined space, a symphony of primal terror. My lungs burned, but I couldn't stop. Just as my legs threatened to give way, I burst through a hatch onto the deserted upper deck. The moon cast an ethereal glow on the rainforest canopy, a stark contrast to the horror I'd witnessed. Below, the figures swarmed out of the wooden door, their emaciated forms silhouetted against the sickly green light. But unlike the monstrous figures on the Pacific Pearl, they didn't chase me further. Here, on their home turf, they remained confined. The Danube Whisper continued its journey down the Amazon, a luxurious vessel gliding through a treacherous paradise. But for me, the veneer of luxury was forever shattered. I knew the darkness still pulsed beneath the surface, a chilling reminder that even the most breathtaking excursions could harbor secrets best left undisturbed. The melody still lingered in my dreams, a haunting echo of the primal terror that lurked in the heart of the rainforest.